mogul and knew nothing about the story, and I were just reading the screenplay, I'd say, you know, my gosh, this script is metamorphosed into a fist, and now it's socked me in the nose. It's got so much dramatic power in it. It tells Christine Collins' part of the story fairly accurately, as far as I can tell, though, of course, everything is a bit dramatized and ramped up for dramatic effect. Everything that's dramatic is made to seem as absolutely melodramatic as possible. Any resemblance between the character of Stewart Northcott, though, as he's shown in the film, and as he really was, is my silence eloquent? Let's just say the Northcott part of the film, very interesting, very horror film melodramatic as history. If the person who wrote it were a football star at a college back in the old days, even if he were their prize quarterback runner of all time, I don't even think they'd let him stay in school if he turned in a history paper. That would be accurate. But it was, but then of course, that's Hollywood, and this is history, and unfortunately, the two really don't have much to do with each other. That gentleman.
What does that name come and play with the movie?
Say again.
The name of the movie, where does it come? They get the name from?
Changeling. That's a European folk tale that the fairies would sometimes kidnap human children from their cribs and would substitute a fairy child, a changeling, who looked almost exactly like a human child, in its place. The fairy child would be brought up by the humans, and the fairies would raise the kidnapped adult child. And what happened with Christine Collins, which was a fascinating side story in its own aspect, was that a young boy, a young runaway from the Midwest named Arthur Hutchins Jr. had run away from home and wanted to get to California and get in the movies. He was in a little cafeteria in DeKalb, or is it DeKalb? How do they say it in Illinois? DeKalb, Illinois. And someone said, hey, you look a lot like that missing boy, Walter Collins, whose picture's in all the papers. And Arthur got an idea, hey, that kid lived in California. If I pretend to be him, I can get a free trip out to California. So Christine wrote him and said, you know, Walter, is it really you? And do you miss your house? And in her letters, she'd say, reveal lots of details, imagine, on the order of, aren't you happy to know that your three Zane Grey, favorite Zane Grey novels are still in the bottom cubby hole in the drawer underneath the teddy bear that you loved when you were a child, which is now missing one eye? And he picked up on all of these little details that supposedly only Walter Collins could know, and said, yeah, Mom, I remember all that. Thanks for reminding me. And she went out, and he went out to California, but Christine Collins didn't immediately recognize him as her son, and the cops were a bit suspicious as well, but the poor lady, whether her arm was twisted by the cops, as in the movie, so they could say, look, we've got to solve this missing persons case, so please just take it even if it's not your son so we can get good headlines. I don't know if that was the case, but she took the boy home, but then the next month took him back and saying, look, I can't delude myself anymore. This is an imposter, it's not my son. And they said, what, are you crazy? Or so they sent her to the psychopathic ward of the General Hospital for tests, and only after she was proven sane did they release her. And then she raised an awful ruckus, which resulted in the police department getting into a world of grief. And it's the idea of this imposter coming back posing as her stolen son. That's why the movie's called Changeling. I think this gentleman had a question.
The name of Wineville, now it's Mariloma, these crimes, did it have anything to do with the name change?
Oh yes, in 1930, that's why Wineville's name was changed to Mariloma, because ghoulish publicity seekers or sightseers Perhaps the Riverside Chamber of Commerce was conducting a murder tour of Riverside County, and they got so tired of the Riverside Chamber of Commerce bus stopping and going through Wineville and saying, oh, okay, this is where it happened. Here's Walter Collins' chicken coop, and the Winslow boys were killed here. And Gordon Stewart Northcott would often stop at this public fountain to drink. They changed the name to Mira Loma. But apparently, as the lady who wrote that article in Inland Empire magazine said, it didn't work. We can't overcome our fascination with the case, and you haven't been able to get rid of Northcott's memory. Someone in the back, yes?
I was just curious, Walter Collins, how did they determine he was, that Northcott had taken him and so forth?
Well, Sanford Clark remembered Walter Collins having stayed for so long at the ranch, and he told of the story, and all of his other stories checked out when they were investigated by the police and the DA, and he told of how the mother had said, you know, Walter's got to die, and we must all strike a blow so we'll share equally in the guilt. And the mother also confessed to striking the death blow, though she told various stories. Like, for instance, I was carrying some food out to Walter, and I saw that his head was bashed in, and I thought, oh, the poor boy, he's suffering, so I must put him out of his misery. So I just took the axe and gave him one conk, and I just did a mercy killing.
How did you first become aware of the case?
About 1989, when I was visiting my parents who live in Orlando, but my dad was working in Tallahassee then, and I was visiting my parents, and whenever I have free time, I love to go to local libraries. I guess that's a big surprise. I'm a writer and I like history, so I think it's fun just to go to local libraries and snoop around. And I happened to find this very old true crime history from the early 30s, and it contained just a single, less than a paragraph reference to Northcott. Then, a little while later, in another almanac, I found a reference. And what I always do when I hear of these crimes that sound very interesting but aren't chronicled very widely, I just went to the newspaper archives. I thought, this is interesting. And then I think the first picture I saw of Stewart was not this wonderful picture that's on the cover of my book, which I think is the greatest and most chilling of him ever taken. He looks like he's about to incinerate you with his gaze. But it was a picture where he'd just been told that his mom had confessed to Walter's murder, and he was reading a note she'd sent to him, and he was just sort of smiling maniacally, and his face, even though he was smiling in this picture and looking right at the photographer, his long, narrow features, they really looked rat-like, and his maniacal smile and his gaze, I guess he just hypnotized me. Just staring at that picture of him, I felt like a mongoose staring at a cobra, and I guess he just imprinted himself on my head, and then before I knew it, I was in too deep, and I was just digging like a man obsessed, and I just knew I had to keep on until I finished. Ma'am?
You talked about his confessions. Did he ever reveal anything that caused the pedophilia?
No. What happened, though, was that he kept saying, usually he would say, I killed no one, but then he would sometimes make these elaborate confessions that, you know, like I said, if they weren't so awful, they really make you laugh because they were so ridiculous. Kind of like his mom saying, oh, the poor little boy's head had been bashed in, so I just had to knock him on the head to put him out of his misery. But he claimed, even though he was innocent, he said, oh yeah, my dad sexually abused me when I was a little boy, which wasn't true. And then he and his mom cooked up the story that Stewart is actually the product of an incestuous union between my daughter Winifred and my husband. So if he's the child of incest, he must be all screwy, and so he's crazier than a June bug.
I live in Vera Loma, and my husband thinks he knows which house it is.
Does your book reveal the address, or do I need to research?
I don't reveal the address of the house, but I was there